Thank you, Helen. Oh dear. So where do I start? First of all, it's like I'm just so honoured to be here and to be surrounded with so many women, so many inspirational women. And I hope when I share my story that I can also be an inspiration and really help women to give them hope, to know that they can trust again, that they can heal, that they can forgive. And you know, my healing journey and my forgiveness journey and my trust journey has been massive, very, very massive. But I believe that we don't have to live in our past. Our past never has to define us. You know, my life is pretty good now. I would say I talk about it being deliciously divine, magnificent. That's one of my bit of taglines, deliciously divine. But let me tell you, it certainly wasn't like that for many, many years. In actual fact, it was the reverse. It was miserable. But a lot of people didn't know that because I've always seemed to have this sort of positive outlook on life. You know, I got a pretty quirky sense of humor. I'd make jokes of things, but really, and even though I appeared like I had it all together, it was a far cry. I certainly didn't. In actual fact, there were many times in my life I felt a complete failure. I felt completely worthless. And I went way, 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 way off my path. And it was a painful journey. I'm going to say was a painful journey because I'm over the pain. I'm over the misery. And like I said, now I can say that I have this deliciously divine life. Now, no life is perfect, but I can still say that I have a lot to be grateful for. And, you know, it's ironical that my surname is Worthy. I married my Mr. Worthy eventually. I'll go back to how I sort of got to that point. But it's ironical because my whole life has been about increasing my worth. Because to be honest, I didn't have any self-worth. And I don't even think I had any self-love. Like I said, I felt like a failure. I felt like a misfit. I felt like I never fitted in. In some ways, I still don't fit in, but now I don't care. That's the difference. Sometimes I still feel like that, but I've embraced who I am. And that's one of my messages, you know, that's one of my big messages is, of course, not live in your past, that we can heal, we can forgive, but just to be you. And that the right people are going to love you and like you and support you. And don't worry about the rest of them. It's the number one thing I help women with is people pleasing. It's huge. It's like, why are we wanting to please everyone? We end up pleasing no one, including ourselves. So I had to get over that. I had to really, really do a lot of work to actually increase my worth. Now, unfortunately, throughout my life, I did attract 3 abusive relationships. Now, abuse comes in all forms, and I'm talking emotional, verbal, I'm talking physical, I'm talking sexual, and I'm talking financial. And unfortunately, I obviously had some big lessons to learn because I experienced all forms of abuse. So it's really important now that I teach other women that's why I talk about not living in the past. I talk about that we can heal because I've been to the pits of darkness. I've been on the floor crying, wailing like a baby, wondering whether I was going to survive, to now loving my life. And so I know it's possible because I'm not any more special than anyone else. I'm a demonstration that you can love again. You can move forward in your life. You know, in my 20s, I started on my spiritual and my personal development journey. And I was introduced to the law of attraction, actually. And I was like, oh my goodness. You know, I started using some of these principles of affirming and, you know, visualizations, and I had some successes. But like I said, I went way off my path. And I'm going to mix up my story a little bit today and add in a different element because I spoke in New Zealand. I'm going to be brave. I'm going to mix it up. You know, before I do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about my childhood and why I think I had low self-worth. And there's no blame here. I am completely accountable for my life. But let me tell you a little snippet into my childhood. It was dysfunctional. I had parents that didn't even like each other, never mind love each other. There was domestic violence in the home. I had a brother who bullied me and my older sister. There was some inappropriate sexual behavior from male family members. And I was bullied at school. So my self-worth wasn't great. And, you know, that's part of the reason why I became very passionate about changing my mindset. Really passionate about reprogramming my negative conditioning. You know, I had a lot of insecurities and a lot of fears, and it was like I became this really scared girl to this scared woman. So I needed to break the cycle. You know, so let me take you back to my first abusive relationship. Now, this is a very unusual type of abusive relationship because I had this fairy tale growing up that I would marry I know it sounds like a cliche, my knight in shining armor. We lived in the worst house in the street. I wanted a beautiful house. I got one pair of shoes a year, and I just had to go to school with holes in my shoes. So I got bullied for that as well. And I've always been a little bit, even through all that stuff, I was always been a bit of an optimist and had this vision of meeting my knight in shining armor and living in a beautiful house and wearing beautiful dresses and beautiful shoes and all those sorts of things. Be really careful what you wish for, because there's some real fundamentals that I missed here, and I'll explain more as I explain my story. So I'm going to take you back to when I met my first husband and my first abusive relationship. And like I said, this is a little bit unique because this man was my knight in shining armor. This man was ended up being the father of my child. I thought all my dreams had come true. We did live in a beautiful house. I did wear beautiful dresses and beautiful shoes, and I had my beautiful girl and my beautiful husband who I loved with all my heart. Now, he wasn't abusive to me, but he had a really dark, deep secret. I remember very clearly a knock at the door. It was, we met actually in, when did we meet? 2000. I remember Collingwood won the grand final. We met and we started dating, and then we got married. No, 1990, sorry. I'm getting all my dates. See, I've changed it up a bit, so I'm sort of, bear with me with my dates. In 1990, we met because my daughter was born in 93, so I had to do the math really quickly on that. And we started living together, and then we got married in 1992. And I remember 19, it doesn't really matter so much about the dates, but I think my daughter was 2 at the time, and we had a knock at the door, and it was the police.
It's beautiful.
Can someone put themselves on mute, because I can hear some conversations in the background? So there was a knock at the door, and it was the police. And it was at that moment, my life and my daughter's life was going to change dramatically. As it turned out, my husband was charged with child sexual abuse charges, and he had abused his daughter. He ended up, there's a whole big long backstory. You can read the book and you can get all the horrible juice. There's some juice in there, but there's some horrible stuff in there, some dark stuff in there too. So all the details are in the book. However, he denied it for 6 months. Now, I love this man. He's the father of my child. And he said he didn't do it. And you know, I'm a little bit naive, but how can you believe that your husband, the man that you love, the man who's your knight in shining armor, would be a sex offender and a child sex offender? And even worse than that, offending his own daughter, his beautiful daughter, who I also loved, who was my stepdaughter. And I've got a daughter with this man. So for 6 months, he denied it. But then finally, he actually confessed. And I still don't think that's a big shock. So I don't think it even really hit me. I think I went into my numb state. As it turned out, he went to prison. And during the court case, I found out that he'd actually abused his first daughter as well, because the daughter that I knew was his second daughter. My daughter was his third daughter. And the first daughter had passed away from a drug overdose, and she had allegedly been abused as well. When I heard that, I think it was a wake-up call for me, because it's like, what the hell? Then I started to realize what the sort of man that I had married, and that I could no longer be with him. So the abuse was very emotional, because he obviously had a very dark side. I had no idea, absolutely no clue. The only clue that I had was that he was a little bit mentally not balanced, was that he had bulimia. And I did actually encourage him to see a psychiatrist as well. But anyway, he went off to jail, and I decided, after I'd heard that he was abused the first daughter, that I couldn't continue with this marriage. And, you know, people were saying, oh, just hang in there, you know, go and visit him occasionally, because his family were very wealthy and they were going to look after me. And it's like, I can't live like that. It's not about money. It's not about my security, my financial security. So I decided that I would leave him. So I did, whilst he was in prison, and he hated me for it. And his whole family turned their back on me. So I felt very alone. I was a single mother, and my whole life had just, like, what do? You wake up one day and you feel like your whole life's over. But you get on with life, because you've got to, you know, my daughter was 3 at the time. But that wasn't the worst. Well, that was pretty bad. But for me personally, it was the next relationship was by far more abusive. So in my vulnerable, very naive state, I was going to attract the most abusive relationship ever. And he was the man that would abuse me in every shape, way, and form. Physically, verbally, sexually. He raped me one night. He anally raped me one night. And he financially ripped me off for everything that I had. So I know pain. I know pain. I know misery. But fast forward, there was a lot of healing to do. There was a lot of forgiveness. And in that time, I did a lot of numbing out. I did gamble a lot, because it was easier to actually not deal with the pain of having a sex offender husband, father of my child, and then attracting the most atrociously abusive relationship ever. There was a lot of healing to do. There was a lot of, you know, and I did do some healing, but unfortunately, a lot of the time I blocked it out. I became numb and I gambled. It was easier to sit there and play the pokies and numb out. But I had to wake up, and I had to realize, what the hell was I doing with my life? I attracted another abusive relationship. That one was more verbal, and I'm not going to go into the full details of that because I've got limited time. And I did speak about that recently in New Zealand, but at the New Zealand summit. It was actually after the third abusive relationship that I really did start to wake up. It's like, what are you doing, Jo? I think you're worth more than this. There was something inside of me that was still alive. Like, I'm walking around half dead. I'm unconscious most of the time because I'm gambling and sleeping and eating and being in survival mode, being a single parent and bringing up my daughter. And getting through all that shame shit. I brought these men into my life. I was the one who chose my husband. And now I had to actually live with the fact he was my father's child. He was the father of my child. So I had to go through a lot of forgiveness, like I said, a lot of trust issues, and a lot of shame shit, which I talk about in my book. We got to get rid of that shame shit because it weighs you down. So I did go through a massive more healing and waking up and becoming conscious of my life and starting to work more on my worth. I did go back to the fundamentals of the law of attraction, but I also had to combine the belief in myself, my worth. And this is where the magic can occur, when we start to believe in ourselves. When we increase our self-love and our self-worth, we're far less likely to be attracting abusive relationships. So do the work. For goodness sake, we just keep doing the work on yourself. I had to keep doing the work. I still do the work. But in 2008, something really interesting happened. I met my Mr. Worthy, who's now my husband. We got married 3 years ago. Now, it took him, we actually started living together in 2009, and he asked me to marry him many times. And it took him 8 years. He's a patient man for me to accept his marriage proposal. And I did a bit of an eat, pray, love. I went off to Bali in 2016 and I came back. It was like, I really love this man. I feel like I've opened my heart. You know, I've been through a lot of healing, a big journey. A lot of women have been abused. There's a lot of women in this room would know that it's a big journey and that we need to keep doing the work. But it was like something really major shifted. And I started to really realize that I love this man. I could trust this man. So on the way back from Bali in 2016, I planned my wedding and we got married in 2017. And he's my Mr. Worthy. You know, no marriage is perfect, but my goodness, we have a huge amount of respect for each other. He supports me in everything that I do. So I now run this amazing business. So my life is really delicious now because I'm married. And my story is not so much about your traditional love story. Yes, I did fall in love and I did remarry, but this is really, my main story is that I actually started to honor and appreciate who I was as a woman. I run an amazing business now. I work with fantastic clients. I run retreats for women because you know what I'm passionate about? I'm passionate about bringing bliss and joy and fun into women's lives. And I love running my retreats and I love my workshops. And you know, I mean, I do my coaching as well. And my story, well, you can read if you want to read the whole story, it's in my book, Love Worthy. But my goodness, it's been a massive journey. But now one thing that I've always, which I didn't really touch on, is that I've always been grateful, even in those darkest, deepest, shitty moments when I woke up and I had nothing. Well, I didn't have nothing. I had my daughter and I had my health. I was grateful. So change your mindset, become really grateful, fall in love with you, and create these amazingly, deliciously divine life because you have the power and it doesn't matter what's happened in your past. You can create the life that you love. You can bring joy. You have the power to bring joy into your life every single day. And start small. One thing every day that brings you joy. Because when you're in joy, you don't feel fear. And you deserve it. You deserve to become the very best version of you and live a magnificent, beautiful, amazing, delicious life. Thank you, everyone.